Hey friends, welcome back. This is Ashley over at Uncommon Roots Homestead, and today I want to talk about flowers in the potager garden. Can I have that again?
Bum, bum.
I like it.
It's a theme song.
Before we jump into it, look at these. These are my younger blueberries that are up towards the front of the garden. But look at, they're just loaded. Really, if I was a good blueberry mom, I would have already plucked those blossoms off. That's really the best thing to do. So those are only 2-year blueberries. They're really young, they're not established. I shouldn't really let them set fruit. They'd be stronger if I plucked those blossoms off and let them focus all of that energy on growing and then enjoy the fruit really at year 3 or year 4. But I just can't do that. All right, so like I said, I want to talk about flowers today in the potager garden. So I've talked about this before, but a potager garden is a kitchen garden. But one thing that really sets a potager garden apart from, other traditional gardens or a market garden is the inclusion of perennials and herbs and flowers into the garden. So a potager garden historically is something that mixed beauty with practicality. So flowers with vegetables. And that's really something that I'm trying to do here in this front potager garden. So I, throughout the garden design, kind of selected areas that I wanted to really focus on perennial flowers as well as some annual flowers. So today I want to talk about what kind of flowers I am going to grow and where I've put those. So first, I want to talk about roses. So I am a sucker for roses. I absolutely love them. I love to cut them and have them in the house. I just think they're gorgeous. I just love roses. I even love like the cheap knockout roses that you see that are like resistant to everything. In fact, those might be my favorite kind of roses because they require such little care. Roses can be a deep, dark hole that you can fall down into because there are so many specialties and like roses can be really particular. So we'll see. This year I'm actually growing a few different varieties of roses, and I've placed them in the garden specifically so that they will kind of add these pops of color throughout the different beds. So right here at the front I have George Washington roses. I'm gonna have to look it up and I'll paste it down in the description below. But I've got 2 white roses here on the side, one there and then one over there.
A big one.
We do have big ones. You look like I don't even know. You look beautiful. You ready to go?
Yes.
But then I also planted.
Make sure I'm buckled.
You are all buckled. You look good.
Yeah.
You got all your bows there, huh?
Uh-huh.
Cool. She's ready to go. I have red climbing. I think they're called red flame roses, and they will actually climb up over this arch trellis. I've got 2 of those, one on each side. So they should climb up and cover this. And I'm hoping that they'll do it this year. Sometimes it's they grow year 1, they're a little bit slow in the beginning, and then they'll just take off and shoot up over. And then year 2, you kind of get that right from the beginning, it'll cover. So I've got those roses here at the beginning. So as you enter the garden, you enter through this like landscape of flowers. And then what I've done is as you go down and you're entering and you're going, here you go, you're walking down this pathway, down this way. I have 2 more rose bushes here at the end of these beds. So I have one here and then one there. Those are, one is a purple rose and one is a pink rose. So those are all of the roses that I've put into this garden. I do have a section of the garden that, now this is technically an herb, but I mean, lavender is also a flower. I want to, in my plan, I had taken this section in front of the asparagus beds and I had made this entire section a lavender kind of field. So I right now have about 20 lavender plants that have germinated and they're doing really well. So what I'm going to do is like a raised in-ground bed here in front, and I'm going to plant that lavender there. So this should just be like a row of lavender that kind of like pulls it all together. So you enter through the roses kind of like cap off the ends, and then we're gonna have this row of lavender. So those are the perennial flowers so far that I have. I also, I ordered a number of dahlia tubers, and then I actually started some dahlias from seed as well. And I'm gonna be sprinkling those throughout the beds. Dahlias in my zone, they could be perennial, but usually I'm probably gonna have to dig up the tubers and then dry them and separate them for them to actually come back. It gets a little bit too cold in some areas. Like I might have a microclimate where they could live, but for the most part, I'm gonna consider them an annual. So I'm gonna just kind of sprinkle them throughout the garden. I thought about dedicating a bed to dahlias, but kind of decided against it. So I might still turn my mind back and do that. Isla would like to go on a ranger ride.
No, I'll drive the ranger in the garage.
Oh, you're going to drive it by yourself?
No, you drive.
Oh, I'm going to drive it?
Yeah.
Okay, in a minute, okay?
Give it a try.
Just give it a try. So those are the flowers for the most part that I'm growing. I also have some poppies. I didn't actually get around to starting those this year, so I think what I'm going to do is actually wait on the poppies and do them next year. She's a bird. I am going to do zinnias. So zinnias are a flower that I always put in my garden. They grow really rapidly. I just direct sow them straight into the garden. I think they're beautiful. You can cut them. They have multiple heads per plant. So it's something that just adds a lot of beauty and is really easy to add a pop of color to the garden. We'll also probably do some marigolds this year. I would love to get peonies, and I would love to get hydrangeas. I didn't do those yet. I think I want to wait and get this whole space completed and then add those into the potager garden. I'm trying to balance the amount of flowers and beauty with plants that serve a greater purpose. Though I think that having something beautiful in the garden is serving a pretty big purpose, right? Like if you don't have something in your garden that you enjoy just being around or looking at, or I mean, flowers serve a purpose. I like to cut them and keep them on my counter. Those things add value to a garden, and they make the garden a space that you want to be in. So I think that that's valuable, right? I think that that's important. So those are the flowers that I'm planting in the potager garden and kind of how I'm sprinkling them through. My end goal is to have a little bit of something beautiful in every single bed. And now, I mean, from my perspective, all of the plants are beautiful, but having a pop of color, it really adds some like depth, and it changes the landscape of your garden, which I think is really interesting, and it makes it even more inviting than it would be, normally. So there are a lot of flowers that are great companion plants, marigolds with tomatoes, things like that they just grow really well together. They're great companions. So that's always something to take into consideration too. If you're planting flowers along with your garden, I found that zinnias do great with almost anything, and they will adapt to wherever you've put them. In my garden last year, the zinnias are probably the thing that did the best out of everything that I planted. They came up in the shady spots. They twirled their way around the squash. Like they made it work. And so I really appreciated that about zinnias. And I am, because of that, going to pop them into every free spot that I have in the garden this year, because they're just so beautiful. And it's like one seed will present you with 20, 40 flowers throughout the season. And they're just gorgeous, and they really fill a space. So I highly recommend. There are so many different flower varieties, and I am just kind of scratching the surface myself on like which varieties I want of annual flowers to add into my space. I am growing, cosmos and a couple different types of flowers this year that I've never grown before, kind of to be determined on how I feel about those after the season, how they kind of fill their space, and the kind of texture they add to the garden and color and things like that. So I will definitely follow back up and let you know which flowers were my favorite of the ones that I grew this year. But I think that it's really important to not just focus on annuals, but make sure that you're getting some perennial flowers into your space too. Not only are perennial flowers so much easier because you plant them once and then you're just kind of maintaining them and taking care of them, and they're going to continue to add beauty to your space. You don't have to worry about, you know, starting seeds and getting them in the ground and things like that. But they also just add a like seasoned depth to the garden. Like you can tell when you're looking at an established rose bush versus, you know, a patch of zinnias that just came up for the first time. And of course, sunflowers. I'm growing a lot of sunflowers this year, which I'm really excited about. But that's kind of my approach to flowers in the potager garden this year. I'm excited to see how it goes. The potager garden is still coming along. It's getting there. It's getting there. I was talking to one of my friends earlier this week, and I just told her, you know, I was telling her that, like, I'm at the point where I'm just, like, over it. And I almost, like, regret this. And she was like, what do you mean you regret your garden? And I was like, I don't regret my garden. That's not what I mean. But I think that standing on the outside, I underestimated the amount of work that goes into starting from scratch. And I think Kevin did too. We knew this was going to be a big project. We knew that we had a lot to do. We're building a farm from scratch. Like there's nothing here when we started. And so all of these projects are not just like little projects that we're fixing or like doing little things. Like these are huge projects that take a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of time. And we have busy lives, right? Like I work full time, like with 2 kids. We have just a lot going on. And so I underestimated how big this project was and with the space of our garden. So our garden itself is not too giant. I mean, comparatively, we have about 600 square foot of in-bed growing space and then about 2,000 square foot of raised, kind of like in-ground raised beds. Like we're just building up the soil and growing like in-ground, about 2,000 square feet of that. So we have about 2,600 square feet of growing space this year, which that's not small, right? Like that's not a small amount of space, but it's also not the biggest garden in the world. But I underestimated how much work that it was going to be. And I think that sometimes when we like watch other people or we see people gardening in large spaces, it's easy to be like, oh, that's so easy. Like I could definitely do that. Like if I only had the space, right? Like I look at this front acre of our property and I see so much potential. I see so much opportunity. And now that we're like in the thick of it, I've realized like, this is why we start in smaller spaces, right? Like if we had never gardened before, if we had never built beds before, we probably would have given up by this point. This is a hard project and this is not our first garden building from scratch. So it's like, there's value in appreciating where you are now and not just trying to jump to the next level. I think back to like when we first purchased this property and I was kind of walking the whole thing and trying to figure out like, where am I going to grow this year? And I originally thought that like right down in our long pasture that I would just turn that whole thing into this giant garden. I mean, I'm talking like a 3-acre garden that in my head I envisioned these beds that were 100 feet long and just this like huge amount of growing space. And I think back to that now and I'm like, we never would have made it. We never could have done that. Like we couldn't start there. And we decided, hey, let's take this first year and let's garden up at the front of the property and let's create what to us, we actually called this like a small garden. And now that we're like knee deep in this project, I'm like, man, this is anything but a small garden. This is such a wonderful space. There's so much opportunity. We're going to have the ability to grow so much food, but this is a big project and it's overwhelming at times. And I've wanted to give up, but I know that it's going to be worth it and we will soon be done soon. And it's going to be worth it. So if you're, building your garden for the first time or building your homestead for the first time, like we are here, when you feel oh, sorry. I thought she was taking it off. If you feel like it's just a lot and you're feeling overwhelmed and like there's
Mommy,
just,
get my water.
if you feel like it's just never gonna be done, I want you to be encouraged because we feel that way too. And I know it will be done, right? Like I know that there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And with each of the projects that we're able to finish in each of the areas of this farm that we're able to rejuvenate and bring life back into, I know that we're doing something good for this space.
In my computer.
Yeah. We're doing something good for this space and we're adding.
No.
I'll get it. Boop. I'll have to get it when I get up, buddy. But anyways, we're adding a lot of value to this space and we're adding a lot of joy for ourselves and things that we're going to be able to reap the fruit from. And I know that we're changing.
Where is it?
We're changing this place forever.
Where is it?
But yeah, it's going to be worth it. And nothing worth having is easy. And if you're in a space where you don't have all of the space that you want and you're dreaming about like your forever farm or your forever homestead or forever garden, take time to learn now and to make mistakes now, because when you have a larger space, making mistakes or doing things, you know, in a way that you wish you hadn't done them, it sets you back so much further. And
Hi, Daddy.
appreciate that these projects are going to take time and they're going to be exhausting and they're going to feel like they're never ending. But it's going to be worth it. And so we are going to keep trucking away. You know, we're about 2 weeks from our final frost and we are close, but not as close as I wish we were to having all of our space prepared. But
Mommy, come swing me.
okay, I'll come in just a second. Go over there with Daddy. But I know that it will get done. And I know that, you know, it's not the end of the world if we finish this project a couple weeks after our final frost date, that we still have a whole season of growing and that we're going to be able to grow so much food in this space, and that it still is going to be the beautiful garden that I envision it to be. It already is. It's already becoming that. And sometimes you just have to be a little bit easier on yourself because it's hard. We're in a hard stage of our life. We have little kids that require a lot of us, and we're building a farm from scratch that requires a lot of work and effort, and we have to prioritize what we're doing. We have animals that we have to take care of, and sometimes the things that we just, you know, in a perfect world would knock out in 5 minutes, or, well, not 5 minutes, but knock out in a week, they take a month. And we just have to find the grace for ourselves, because it's going to be okay and it's going to get done. And there's no reason that you have to finish a project overnight. You know, Kevin and I were laughing about the garage and the paint job that's about, I don't know, 60% done right now. And we just haven't finished it because all these other priorities have come up and things that we want to get done, and we just haven't circled back to that yet. And we're laughing, and I just said, you know, save it for a time where we don't have projects. And we both laughed and said it'll probably never get done if we do that. But it's there's a freedom and there's just a weight lifted off when you say, you know what, this is good enough. And we love this space that we're in, whether it's completely done and buttoned up and perfect, or if we have, you know, some wonky 24-foot beds that could have been built a little bit differently. They're going to grow food. It's still going to be a space that's going to bring so much life to our family. So that's how I'm feeling today. And as I think about the flowers that I'm going to plant here in just a couple weeks in this potager garden, it makes me both anxious for the completion and at peace with knowing that this is going to be a beautiful space no matter what we get done or we don't. So, friends, thank you for joining me today. Until next time.